they behaved was absolutely atrocious. The way they really tortured him and his family, I thought it was a disgrace. The main base of the Democrats have shifted so far left that we'll end up being Venezuela. This country would end up being Venezuela. I think a lot of Democrats are going to be voting Republican on November 6th.
All these angry people out there, they know that it is the people who are sitting in the Senate that they've elected who are making these decisions, and they're going to go to the polls and they're going to vote differently.
Both sides saying that the Brett Kavanaugh situation, now Justice Brett Kavanaugh, will motivate their sides come midterm elections. Look at just some of the races that some of the polls have shifted in the past week. The Florida Senate race before Rick Scott was up 1.6. Now Nelson up 2.4. Arizona was a pickup for Sinema, the Democrat there in Arizona Senate race. The Texas Senate race before Cruz, 3.4. Now Cruz by 6. How it plays across the country and whether it's really tied to Brett Kavanaugh or not, well, that's what we have a panel for. Chris Stirewalt is politics editor here at Fox News. Leslie Marshall, syndicated talk radio host, and former White House press secretary Ari Fleischer. You know, we just picked out those three, Chris. You look at some other polls that have come out this week about enthusiasm, Democrats and Republicans. NPR Marist poll up to 82% on both sides. How does it play?
The volume goes to 11 on this one. Yeah. We were just having a discussion, a decision team call where we were talking about what we expect turnout to be. And honest to goodness, I cannot tell you right now what kind of a turnout situation we're looking at. 2014 saw the lowest midterm turnout since 1942 when we had some other stuff to deal with. And I have no idea whether we're going to see a surge on both sides, a lopsided, or are a large number of people going to be so disgusted by what's going on, so grossed out by the current political climate that they just that they absent themselves.
But it's clear that the whole thing motivated both sides?
Look, I think the rule of thumb here is if you're playing out of position, this was a bad week for you. If you're a Republican in a blue state, it's a bad week for you. If you're a Democrat in a red state, it's a bad week for you because what it's done is brought the intensity up on both sides. It's more important for Republicans, though, because they were lagging. So this gave them something they needed.
Leslie, thoughts?
I agree, but I think it's temporary, except for women. You know, when you're at a restaurant and you don't like your food, you ask to speak to the manager. And I think it's like that. The Democrats are angry. When other people in this country were angry, whether they're Republicans, Democrats, Independents, you ended up with Donald Trump as president. So I think we are going to see numbers that we haven't seen in certain communities. I think millennials will come out, Latinos, but women. I think this is really going to be the year of women. And I think Kavanaugh, this whole situation has definitely, as we see in numbers, has had some women in the Republican Party say, this isn't for me.
Well, the president addressed that on Air Force One, asked a question about women in the elections.
The women, I feel, were in many ways stronger than the men in his favor. So you have a lot of women that are extremely happy, a tremendous number of women, because they're thinking of their sons, they're thinking of their husbands and their brothers and their uncles and others. And women are, I think, extremely happy.
All right, you know, it depends on where you are. Do we see these suburban districts, House races, where it seems like the president's approval is underwater, and maybe even more so after this Kavanaugh situation. But other places, it plays exactly opposite.
Well, there's been one factor that we've seen for a year, and it's consistent, and that's Democrats are fired up. Special elections that Republicans typically win by double digits, we were winning by 1 digit. And in the case of Pennsylvania, we lost a safe Republican district. What's changed now, and the question is how long will it change, is conservatives are fired up. Now, let me give you 3 numbers on why that's so important. 32, 42, 37. When George Bush was president,
a whiteboard. I mean, why didn't you bring a whiteboard? Where the props? Seriously, I mean, where's the props? All right. Okay, all right.
32, 42, 37.
Okay.
In 2006, Bush's last midterm, when he lost the House and the Senate, Republicans lost them all. The percentage of the electorate that said they were conservative was 32%, a very low number. 4 years later, Barack Obama's first midterm, 42% of the electorate said they were conservative. Republicans won the House in the biggest midterm sweep in 70 years. 4 more years later, the second second Obama midterm, 37% of the electorate identified as conservative. Republicans took the Senate. The point being, if conservatives sit at home and sit out the election the way they did in 2006, Republicans are dead in the water. If, as a result of the Kavanaugh hearing, conservatives get fired up, they decide we're turning out, there's too much on the line, you could have a very different election. And so far, it's all been in the Democrats' favor. In the last 4 weeks, it may shift.
All right. Here is one poll, the NPR PBS Marist poll I referenced earlier. Job approval, it's out today. Job approval for the president, 41-53. That matches our Fox numbers roughly. At that approval number, how does that play across the country? I mean, each state, there's a different kind of Trump approval and how it factors.
That's right. And so the president is back to sort of the upper end of his range, or approaching the upper end of his range. He has lived essentially 38 to 42 or 43%. That's been his space. Sometimes it's up a little, sometimes it's down a little bit. The real, if I can posit this, and this is just a theory I have, and I don't know if this is going to hold, but I think arguably the best part about the Kavanaugh mania, about all of this explosion, biggest news story I can remember, biggest political news story I can remember certainly in 2 years, was this. We weren't talking about all of the stuff that we're usually talking about. I think one of the reasons that the president's approval numbers are, but he did have a very good week and all of the good news that he had on NAFTA and everything else. But also the focus has been off of Trump for a second. It's been on something else for a while instead of constant Trump focus. And I think that helps him get back up in the upper part of his register.
So I just wanted to point this out. Taylor Swift has weighed in on a race in Tennessee. Taylor Swift is putting on Instagram, as much as I have in the past, and would like to continue voting for women in office. I cannot support Marsha Blackburn. Her voting record in Congress appalls and terrifies me. Let's take a look at the race in Tennessee. It's for Senate. Marsha Blackburn, a Republican, and the Real Clear Politics average has her up about 2.7, and the president decided to weigh in on this today.
Marsha Blackburn is doing a very good job in Tennessee. She's leading now substantially, which she should. She's a tremendous woman. I'm sure Taylor Swift has nothing or doesn't know anything about her. And let's say that I like Taylor's music about 25% less now, okay?
I just wanted to play that soundbite. But the point is that everybody has a point of view, you know? I mean, and they're obviously Taylor Swift is weighing in.
Well, I know some people might say whether they like her music or not. Who cares? Why do we care about her political opinion? But millennials care. And people that may not come out and have not come out, certainly for my party, when you were looking at, unlike the president said, a substantial lead, I don't consider 2.7 substantial, less than 3%, certainly within the margin of error. And we are talking about a very red state. To see a Democrat, less than 3 points behind a Republican in a state like Tennessee, I think is very encouraging for Democrats.
But we are 29 days. The news cycles, as I mentioned with Brit Hume earlier, are about 6 or 7 per day. Yeah. So we're going to be looking at a lot of shiny things between now and Election Day. That could change the dynamic entirely.
100%. And by the way, I am for whatever Meatloaf or Robert Earl Keen. Whoever they endorse, I'm with those two right there.
2 out of 3.
Well, that was good.
Check it off. Hey, all right, I got to run. Make your point.
Back to politics. 9 races count in the Senate. 3 are races Republicans could lose: Arizona, Nevada, and Tennessee. There are 6 that the Democrats can lose. And so the math is still with the Republicans, and 9 races are very close and could go either way for either party. So Democrats could take the Senate if they run the table. Republicans could have a very big night in the Senate. We don't know.
I am concerned about it. I don't like hearing about it. And hopefully that will sort itself out. Right now, nobody knows anything about it.
We must reach a conclusion as soon as possible, and the consulate officials can't save themselves by saying he left the consulate. The relevant authorities are obligated to provide proof of this claim on this matter. If he left, you must prove this.
What was explained to us is this: he was killed. Make your funeral preparations. He was made to faint, his body dismembered and distributed to these 15 people and taken out.
This It's a mystery. Journalist Jamal Khashoggi disappeared. We don't know what has happened, but the Turkish officials are saying that 15 Saudis arrived in Istanbul when he entered the Saudi consulate last week, and then he was still inside. The consulate says they are dismissing this, saying it's baseless accusations and that there's nothing to it, and this matter has no facts to it. State Department has not officially weighed in. You heard the president there. But journalists in Saudi Arabia, there have been, we'll just move on to the next the graphic, there have been 15 Saudi journalists and citizen journalists have gone missing in a wave of arrests that began in September. 3 journalists and 7 citizen journalists serving jail sentences in connection with their reporting. And obviously the whole story is troubling from beginning to end. We're back with the panel. Ari, this president especially has established a relationship with the Saudis, but when you hear details like this, he's obviously going to have to call for more information.
Yeah, and that's what he needs to do. And he's starting out on the right path, saying he's concerned. I remember going through this with President Putin and President Bush, when President Putin would round up reporters who he did not like. And we had basically good relations with Russia at that time, early in the Bush administration. And President Bush would bring it up directly to President Putin. He wasn't going to let it interfere with the broader geostrategical issues we were involved in with Russia, but he focused on it directly as freedom of speech and freedom for reporters to be able to report. And it is important America set that moral tone. And I think President Trump said it right the first time. He's concerned, and we need to press the Saudis if indeed this is what they've done, without upsetting the entire relationship.
The Saudis, they've got now a strict no independent media, independent political parties, unions, or human rights. There's a real crackdown in Saudi Arabia right now.
It's strange because they've become so progressive in other areas, women being able to drive, women being able to vote. And, you know, this journalist actually was not an opposition or viewed as an opposition journalist for many, many years. It was when he started to, you know, voice his and many others' opposition to how women were treated when they were striking regarding being able to drive and to vote, and also regarding the war in Yemen and other foreign policy. To me, it's troubling. A couple of things happened today. There were journalists that were like the bureau chief in Istanbul of Reuters was taken into the consulate. It was shown the consulate head to toe. They were opening cabinets to say, see, he isn't here. There are cameras in the consulate. And I'd be interested in seeing the footage of that. Why aren't they showing this? That he entered the building and you see him leaving the building, and they're not offering any of that.
Which is also what the Turkish president, Erdogan, said. He wants to see the surveillance footage. Now, Erdogan doesn't have a great track record either in human rights or protecting journalists. But
when Erdogan's the pro-journalist guy in any situation, this is a pretty stark reflection about what's going on. And I think, to your point, Leslie, the war in the Yemen is now a cancer for the region, for our relationship with the Saudis. Some people call it a genocide. They're calling it, but this proxy war that they're fighting with the Iranians in Yemen is a very toxic thing, and it's leading to lots and lots of other second-order consequences that could impinge on our valuable relationship.
I mean, the Saudis say that they're firing missiles, Iranian missiles, and they're, you know, firing back. It's a humanitarian crisis, clearly. The Saudis deny this story, say they're sending a team to investigate, but we're going to keep investigating it too. Panel, thank you very much.